Deep in the African savanna, where the dry grass rustles in the wind and the sun mercilessly burns the earth, a patrol ranger named Thomas was checking the traps left by poachers. He had been guarding this reserve for many years, knew every path, every bend in the riverbed. But that day, a completely different turn of fate awaited him. He heard a dull, stifled growl, almost a groan. Wary, Thomas followed the sound and soon saw a young lion writhing among the bushes. His front paw was caught in a metal loop left by criminals hunting elephants. The lion was exhausted, dehydrated, and in a panic. To approach such an animal means to risk your life. But Thomas, who had saved animals more than once, knew you can't wait. He did not take his eyes off the lion, slowly crouched down, and began to talk to him calmly, confidently, as if the lion could understand every word. He took out a syringe with a sedative and accurately injected the dose. A few minutes later, the animal's tense body went limp. Thomas freed his paw, examined the wound, and carefully carried the lion into the back of his car. He didn't know it then. This meeting would change them both forever. The early evening painted the sky copper and purple as Thomas delivered the lion to a small field clinic on the edge of the reserve. There were no sterile walls or bright lights, just a wooden shelter, simple tools, and a couple of assistants who were used to wounded zebras and antelopes, but not the king of beasts. The lion was still asleep when Thomas began to clean the paw. Drops of antiseptic hissed on the wound. Bandages lay tightly on the joint. He moved carefully, not like a soldier, but like a man who sensed something more in this animal. He did not know why this lion affected him more than the others, perhaps because of the look in his eyes, full of fear, but not anger. 2 days passed. The lion woke up in a pen of steel bars, where he could walk but not leave. He barely ate, only watching Thomas when he brought water and meat. And then something happened that changed their bond forever. When Thomas entered the enclosure, the lion did not flinch or growl. Instead, he slowly approached and lowered his head, allowing the man to touch his neck. It was the first and only time Thomas allowed himself to smile. In that moment, a thread of trust was formed between man and beast, fragile but real. A month passed. The wound was healing, and the lion, whom Thomas named Ko, became stronger. He no longer looked scared and exhausted. His fur glistened in the sun, and his gait was confident again. Every day, Thomas opened the gate so that Ko could walk around the fenced area, get used to freedom, but he always returned to the enclosure, where the man who had become more than just a savior for him was waiting. However, not everyone was happy with such affection. Other rangers thought that the lion was becoming dangerously tame. "He's a wild animal, Thomas." "You're making a mistake," the patrol leader said. But Thomas silently continued to care for him, believing that trust and kindness are not weakness. One day, when a thunderstorm began, Thomas heard Ko growling, calling, as if he was scared. He ran out of the house and saw Ko scratching at the metal gate. Lightning flashed across the savannah, and then Thomas, without thinking, stepped inside. The lion pressed itself against him, the huge predator seeking comfort in his presence. And in that moment, Thomas realized Ko was more than just an animal. He was a friend. Family. At dawn, a few weeks after the storm, Thomas stood at the open gate of a large enclosure. He was holding a bag of supplies. Ko stood nearby, sensing the change in the air. It was time to release him back into the wild savannah. It was a difficult decision. Thomas knew that Ko would survive both in captivity and in a reserve, but he believed that true freedom is in nature, in a pack, in instincts. He put food at the exit, but Ko was in no hurry to leave. He turned around several times, as if saying goodbye. When the lion finally stepped into the tall grass, Thomas did not call him back. He simply stood silently, while the animal's figure dissolved in the morning mist. The day passed in a fog. Thomas checked the traps, talked on the radio, but his thoughts still returned to the one he had released. And in the evening, returning to camp, he saw tracks. Large, fresh. They led to the enclosure. And there, right next to the fence, lay the carcass of the antelope Keo had killed. As if the lion didn't want to disappear completely. As if he wanted to say, "I'm here." After his rescue, Keo Thomas returned to work. He continued to do what he lived for, saving lives. Once, he pulled a young elephant out of a clay pit. Another time, he found himself in a place where poachers had set snares and ended up trapped himself, injuring his leg. Despite the pain, he did not leave until he had freed all the trapped animals. No one said it out loud, but he was considered a hero. However, his body couldn't take it. Thomas was taken to the hospital after he lost consciousness right in the fields. He had internal inflammation and a high fever. He spent several days in serious condition, hooked up to a ventilator. The doctors fought for him, but neither his family nor his colleagues could predict whether he would survive. On the third day, something incredible happened. The security guard on duty at the entrance barely had time to call the doctors when an adult lion entered the clinic grounds. Silently, without aggression. He walked confidently past people, as if he knew exactly where to go. It was Keo. He stopped at the window of the ward. Behind the glass lay Thomas, pale, motionless, hooked up to machines. But even through his weakness, he felt this presence. His eyelids fluttered. He opened his eyes. Behind the glass was a familiar silhouette. The lion stood motionless, looking straight at him. The doctors couldn't believe it. Some froze, some filmed it on their phones. But no one broke the silence. This was not a visit from a wild beast. It was a visit from a friend. The flip side of salvation. No one knew how the lion found him. The clinic was far from the savannah, surrounded by roads and the noise of the city. But Keo made his way there, confidently, silently, without stopping for cars or people. He knew where he was going. He knew who was there, behind the glass. When Thomas opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was the silhouette of a lion at the window. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't even surprised. Their eyes met, as if everything had been planned. No one moved. People froze, not daring to break the moment. Because it wasn't just a meeting. It was an act of gratitude. And, perhaps, a farewell. Keo stood silently. The wind ruffled his mane, and behind the glass, the instruments hummed softly. He didn't roar, didn't move closer. He just watched. Then, slowly, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the bright haze of the streets. Thomas closed his eyes. He knew that even the wildest creatures remember kindness, and sometimes they come back, not because they have to, but because they know how to feel.